because of science, several technologies have been developed, could be developed. And because of that technology, so many missions could be carried out. And because of those missions, the science could be furthered to even kind of greater frontiers. And this process goes on. Science aids technology, technology aids science. Now technology also aids development. See, we are all living in today's world, and of course I'm sure all of you read history, and you have some idea about how the world was maybe 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and so on. And there is a great transition which is continuing at an accelerated pace. Now, that is a result of technology. So there is science, technology, development, and each feeds into each other. Just like technology feeds into science, development feeds into technology because it creates demand, it creates the pull for technology to go forward. And so it's important for us to understand this dynamics, particularly if we as a nation have to be among the front runners in the world. And this is what I want to bring to you in this brief lecture. That we pursue science for science sake. But while we pursue science for science sake, that we should also transform that into value. Value for economy, value for defense of our country, value for the mankind. And that's a process which is an ongoing process, and we should see India to be one of the front runners in that process, ongoing process. So to kind of explain this theme, many of us, we have a lot of knowledge about our past history, glorious history. We know India was #1 country in the agrarian era. Not only in the context of the wealth of the nation, just like many countries of the world come to India today because we are a great market. In historical past, when the communication, transportation was not very easy, still many countries of the world but they used to come because there was a lot of wealth in this country, and that has impacted our history. This is not a lesson in history, but so these bars here, if you see, those pink bars show the relative economic power of the country, relative GDP in the global. Assume that the global GDP is 100, then the length of those bars indicate, and you will see that in agrarian era or till about year 1700, India was actually #1 country in the world. That is the time came industrial era, and of course we were also not, we had lost our independence. You had the foreign rulers on our soil. So actually the policies were as if Indian resources were used to support the industrial era emerging in Europe, or more particularly in Britain. And from that point onwards, you will see those pink bars shrinking and shrinking, became very small, till after independence, 1947, again they have started growing up. They're still quite small. And of course, today we know our economy is fifth largest in the world, or in fact third largest in the dollar purchase parity terms. And we do expect the economy to rise. We have our ambitions. So we were number one in agrarian era. We couldn't cope up. Manufacturing is still an important activity, but we are well into the knowledge era. Now, knowledge era is quite distinctly different compared to the earlier two eras. Because this here, there is a tremendous support for democratization of activities. There is a tremendous support for decentralization of activities. So in industrial era, as the technology, you start a technology enterprise, the wealth used to concentrate. So while technology enabled people, but it also contributed to growth of disparity. Now the question is, in the new knowledge era, which promotes democratization and decentralization, can we make sure that we raise our human development index, let's say measure of quality of lives, comparable to the best countries in the world, and there is a correlation at the bottom left-hand side of that figure, and the blue triangles at the top, which are in a horizontal line. Can India go and be among one of them? And that should be our aspiration, because then the quality of life of our people would be comparable with the best in the world. And while we do that, we make sure that disparities are minimized. And that's a challenge that we should take for ourselves. So as we implement science, develop technologies, contribute to development, we must conduct ourselves. That's another transformation which is very important. Otherwise, we don't develop human beings, we develop Frankensteins. And that is what I want to stress. So we just celebrated 75 years of our independence. Plenty of achievements, largest democracy which has taken roots, largest population, perhaps the largest market, that's why countries make a beeline here. One of the largest economy, geopolitically a very important country. In terms of various parameters of production or economic activity, we are among the top in agriculture, horticulture products, electricity output, coal, steel, roads, railways, IT infra, what have you. You will find in the globe, India will be number 2, number 3, some places number 1, some 4, 5, but we are at the top bracket. And our economy is growing. What about disparity? Our GDP, while contributes to, in terms of the growth of economy, most of the GDP comes from urban areas, because rural areas, the per capita earning is roughly half of that in urban areas. Talking about disparity, the income share of top 0.1% of our population is as much as 10 to 11%. The income share of top 1% of our population is about 22%. And in that top 1% of population, 40% wealth of the country is concentrated. So there is this, you have to manage this disparity, and one of it's across different domains, but one major domain, if you attack, will be able to deal with this disparity issue better, is this aspect of urban-rural divide. Because as I said, the rural areas, average income is just about half. Now, GDP consists of roughly half coming from services sector, whereas 1/3 coming from the industry sector, with half of that, that is 1/6 coming from manufacturing, and another 1/6 coming from agriculture. So that is broadly the GDP structure of our country. Now it is from this status we achieved a lot, but there are challenges which we have to overcome. How do you go further? So I believe we need to adopt a graded approach to development. And I'm telling particularly for the budding young scientists, when you deploy science in India, I'll come to that a little later. But we should be very clear. We don't do science just for publishing some papers. We do science to contribute to pushing knowledge frontiers, contributing to economy of country, contributing to well-being of our people and well-being of our world. So it's in that context when we look at development, we're quite used to economy-led development. You know, the trading activity which has been going on from time immemorial is driven by money transactions. Today we're talking about technology-led development, new technologies, startups, innovation, driven by competitive value addition, and that's where new technology comes in. And we heard in the previous lecture by Dr. Somnath how great contribution can be made by new technology. And now we are talking about knowledge era. So we are now talking about, because manufacturing, which was you have technology, you set up a manufacturing shop and you start producing. Today's manufacturing is itself research-led. Many of the new enterprises, there is a lot of research on the shop floor as the manufacturing takes place. Research-led industries, you have started seeing the glimpse of it in AI, ML, which everybody talks about. But going forward, new technologies, call it in genetics, call it in the cyber security. There are technologies related to brain function, cognition. So these are all areas where actually these are the prime drivers of economy in a very few advanced countries. And if India wants to be there, we need to transform ourselves to be capable among the production activity, a value addition activity which is research intensive. And this is where I said that new era, then we could do this value addition and promote human welfare through democratization and decentralization. Otherwise, I'm sure many of you have heard about the fear that we have, what will happen to us in the artificial intelligence era. So there are threats, but if we are competent in that area and deploy that competence in the right direction, then I think we can create a lot of benefit both for us and for the humanity. So I think this is where the importance of knowledge institutions, the colleges you study, the schools you study becomes very important. We somehow have a notion that you go to college, study, give an exam, get good marks, be a ranker, and then we think that's all done. That, of course, is the first and very important prerequisite. But knowledge institutions, they are actually mini representation of the world yet to come. That is where we should. So I want to give a comparison just to understand where the world is going and where we are at our best. Of course, the country, there is a lot of variation, but so for example, if you look at Stanford, is one of the top universities of the world, and I have given that distribution. Recently you have this QS ranking of universities 2024, and I counted IIT Bombay, I found, was at 149th position, and that was the only Indian institution in 150 ranks. So I said, let us see how the other countries are doing, and I found US has 34 universities, China has 7, South Korea has 6, Singapore has 2. Singapore is a small, tiny nation, has 2. India has 1. Now you may ask, so what? The answer to that is, on one side, I had some data on Stanford, so I have written there. And in contrast, I have written something which is applicable to IITs as a whole, because those are clearly the top institutions. Of course, we have Indian Institute of Science as well. So, Stanford University, it has around 2,100 award-winning faculty members, including 19 Nobel laureates, 2 field medalists, which is equivalent to Nobel Prize in mathematics. From Stanford, companies such as Google, Cisco, Yahoo, and I'm not going to read that long list, but you're all familiar with this name. They have emerged from Stanford. And according to a 2012 study, since 1930s, because Stanford is an old institution, Stanford entrepreneurs, the faculty and alumni, have started 39,900, I'm sure that number must have crossed 40,000 now, companies, which in turn have created 5.4 million jobs, generated US dollar 2.7 trillion in revenue annually. India's GDP is around that, now it is 3 point something. So one university contributes to that kind of revenue annually. Of course, this is one of the best universities. Now, it's not as if that kind of thing is beyond our reach. In fact, I read a statement by our education minister recently, and that said 6 old IITs together have contributed to $300 to $400 billion. But what made me sad was that was to world economy. More than 100 technology products have been developed and deployed at IIT Bombay alone. So we are moving in that direction, but we have a large gap to cover. And that is what I want to talk to you, because this gap can be covered only by you, the young people. In fact, there is this problem of old mindset, which is also a barrier to bridging this gap. And that's why I have chosen to talk to you about this. Now, our higher research and education institutions, clearly they need to be both knowledge creators as well as value creators. And now, you create value at different levels. at the bottom, lowest level, you just leverage raw materials, resources, and pay for imports, and then raw materials, ores, oils, you export. If you don't have raw materials, you import them. If you have excess raw material, you export to other countries. And that has been the basis of economy. And even today, it happens to be a significant part of basis of our economy. And that requires knowledge inputs. Certainly, doing these things cannot be done by people who are not knowledgeable in those domains. So knowledge inputs are in fact necessary. But I would call that as the lowest level of knowledge activity. Go one step higher, you come to adoption of procedural knowledge to create value, supporting core economies, either by muscle work, people who are engaged in manufacturing, or by nerve work, because there is a lot of intellectuality, particularly in the new knowledge domain, and a marginal brain activity, and contribute to the economic activity. And this has started in our country. It has started in a big way. IT revolution was essentially done. But I still call this as a leveraging available knowledge and creating that activity, economic activity. And most of it, I call it procedural knowledge. Somebody has done something, you repeat that. So I become a good engineer. Somebody has built a house, I also do the same way, build another house. Maybe I do little innovation. And that innovation is important. It keeps on, you do it differently to derive some benefit. And all that is a part, but this is still a part of creating value, pursuing a known activity with incremental innovations. But at the highest level, if you want to really work, you must go up to the frontiers of knowledge, create new knowledge, new research, and then build cutting-edge technologies on the basis of that new knowledge. So you are talking about a technology which is the first time ever, which has not been built by anybody. And then you get a much bigger advantage. So you get into R&D intensive high technology activities. That constitutes the main engine of economic growth in today's world. And that's what is happening. The leading countries in the world, and certainly United States and China are very much there. I'm afraid India is not there yet, but we must make attempts to move there. So further new technologies that would exploit new knowledge domains that are emerging, as I said earlier. Typical examples are genetics, quantum physics, cognitive and brain sciences. Now, this is what our knowledge institutions should do, and the quality higher education that is accessible to all is really the key to both taking the economy forward in per capita terms, but also in terms of eliminating the disparity. Because then if you start delivering the knowledge, implementing them in a way that exploits none but empowers everybody, that is where it will really address the challenge that is there before us. Now, how do you achieve this? We have universities. Look at the bottom half of this figure, and I think you will find all our universities have that. We have departments, we have programs, and I'm talking about frontiers of knowledge. So we have PhD programs, there are individuals doing the research. There is industry collaboration. We talk about industry-institute interaction. It's become a buzzword, but it is at a very marginal level. I deliberately picked up this slide from a foreign university, the University of Tokyo. But most of the universities which are in the top rung, and it has started happening. For example, I gave examples of IIT or IISc. It is actually happening, beginning to happen there. Now, there the industry share, industry participation has become very high. And the skills and knowledge among the research community, uh, in terms of defining programs, defining projects, they are actually significantly different, and I have listed them there. Now, this is the transformation that we must have. The bottom half, which is already there, must get enriched, must become bigger and better, but the top half must be also an equally important and equally big part of our work. And only then you will get this. Now, I have been often defining this as a cultural problem. And again, I'm pointing this out to young people just wanting to get into universities, because this is something that you will have to force the elder people to adopt. Old people, their habits would die, old habits die hard. So there may be very welcome exceptions to that. So take them as your mentors and move forward. Now this is a diagram from a fairly old paper, 1997. This divides the whole research domain into 4 quadrants, defined by 2 axes. The horizontal axis, consideration for use, the value you create, how much I transfer this technology, how much money I learn, and things of that kind. And the y-axis, vertical axis, the quest for fundamental understanding, whether my paper will win a Nobel Prize or not. And then, when you divide the space into this, on this axis in the 4 quadrants, I put it to you that most of our research that takes place in our universities, it actually lies in the bottom left-hand quadrant, which is defined as science that goes nowhere. I want to seek promotion, I must publish 10 papers, I have published 10 papers. Somebody has given this diktat, I have done that. In terms of contribution, what happens, God knows. And I think we should cross that out. That has no place in taking our country forward. If you take the left-hand side top quadrant, which is called the Bohr's quadrant, which is essentially in the domain of pure basic research, because very high emphasis on fundamental research, taking the knowledge frontiers forward, curiosity-driven, pure voyage to discovery, very important. That's where Nobel Prizes are won. So I think we must make sure that the bottom half of that university structure, which I showed, must be dedicated to achieve success in that quadrant. There may be also a lot of work on the bottom right-hand quadrant. It is called Edison quadrant, pure applied research. You know, Edison's work, he tried hard, kept on experimenting until he developed an incandescent lamp. Today it appears a child's play, but you can imagine how important it was at that time, and the way it impacted the world, it transformed the world. That also has an important place, and that is where that industry participation becomes extremely important. Now, while these two are important, the Edison quadrant and the Bohr's quadrant, I think we must try to migrate from both these quadrants into the top right-hand quadrant, which is called Pasteur's quadrant, user-inspired basic research. the work that locates at the center of research in an area of basic scientific ignorance that lies at the heart of the social problem. So you must address a problem before humanity, leverage all your knowledge to address that problem, both in terms of the new knowledge as well as in terms of application of technology. And that is what should drive the value system in our economic, education and economic activity. The second aspect of that cultural transformation is, according to me, how do you reward the people? You reward people according to the organizational objectives, the value system you pursue. And so people respond to that. So if you say that I will count your papers and give you promotion, then there will be a paper factory, which takes science to nowhere. On the other hand, if you reward the impact in knowledge domain, impact in industrial domain, impact in value creation domain, impact to industry, impact to commercial world, if you do that, naturally people will respond. Automatically the organizational culture would change. So while I request all young people to make sure that you get into the right frame of mind, but it's also up to the leaders of the organization, the management of the organizations, to make sure that we reward the right values that are dear to our organization. And so I given two examples. Again, both connected with transportation, rail transportation. One, to go to high-speed rail, which is an incremental activity. And you can have a technology lab where progressively you increase the speed of the rail by doing both the rolling stock as well as the railroad improvements. And you can reach that. That is how the bullet trains and things like that have come up. And there is a lot of merit to those incremental innovations. But if you say that, no, I want a magnetically levitated train and go high speed, perhaps a lab which is devoted to this incremental progress on mechanical way of transportation cannot do anything. On the other hand, there is a fundamental research institution, let us say, where there are experts on electromagnetics, and they may be pursuing electromagnetics in many, many different directions. Those are the people who probably have a higher chance of creating these new innovations. So the question is, the reward system must be such that even a nut-bolt engineer who derives inspiration from such activities should be able to create a disruptive technology in an environment which is dedicated to fundamental research. Today, in a technology lab, the respect for fundamental research is not at the level as it should be. And in a fundamental research institution, the respect for, I deliberately use that word, nut-bolt technology person, is not at the level as it should be. And that is the transformation that we need to create. Now let me come to another third aspect of, again, the cultural change that we need to achieve. And that is, we all know knowledge is a force multiplier. The human capability has gone up using technologies built through new knowledge. That also, you can leverage that capability, enhanced capability, either for exploitation, and that's the animal instinct in all of us, or you can use it for welfare. That's the human instinct, human welfare instinct. So technology is never bad. When we went through this 1974 and 1998 experiments, I was often asked, coming from a Gandhian family, how do you reconcile yourselves to have developed nuclear weapons? And my answer was simple. Technology is never bad. It's the human mind which uses or exploits technology. That determines whether technology is good or bad. Any technology can be used for good purposes. Any technology can be used for evil purposes. So this is an important aspect. So as we pursue our education in education institutions, research institutions, I think development or evolution in human values is also equally important, and perhaps we don't pay adequate attention at all. And so I want to quote H.G. Wells. I'm sure many of you must have already read this, but in the context it's important. Civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And we talk about sustainability, we talk about pandemic taking us to a cliff edge situation. This is all, I think, also a manifestation of the way we are carrying out our human development activity. We must leverage our demographic dividend through right quality of education, most importantly, before it is too late. Now, I said one of the ways of minimizing disparity is to bridge the urban-rural gap. And I don't want to take too much of your time, we're already a little late. But I think it's important that just like we have knowledge institutions which create, on one side, knowledge, on the other side, create wealth. But I think we should also have knowledge institutions which do both, but in respect of rural domain. Because I think there is no use in talking about rural development by developing technologies from urban background and say this is good for you. There are many areas where rural people know much better than us, and this I have experienced firsthand. And that is where we are always caught between the conflict between the traditional knowledge and the modern knowledge, or same thing, urban knowledge and the rural knowledge. And I think this is again a kind of a bad manifestation of the mindset that has developed. We need to create an ecosystem, just like we talk about innovation ecosystem. We need to create an ecosystem in rural areas where, of course, you can get technology from wherever to kind of create benefit. But assimilation of that technology, evolution, improvement of that technology, and finally creating new technology, all that eventually should happen in the rural domain themselves. As many of you may know, the best of technologies, they arise in garages, not in big workshop, because it is the human mind which is the creator of that technology. So I think we need to pay an attention to education in that context. I'll not go into the details because there is paucity of time. So we need to create an enabling environment where there are several things, and again I'm not going to list them here, but things have started happening. For example, there is only one research park at IIT Madras. If you go to other countries, I know in a country like Sweden there were 70 research parks when we had only one. So that is, just by using buzzwords, things don't happen. we need, for a size of India, we need 500 such research parks. Similar to IIT Madras Research Park is a great success story. They have started building now, other IITs have added, but it should be there everywhere. So, and this is just one example. Likewise, there are several other things. Most important thing is what I call the triple helix framework for large platforms. I told you about India has missed the microelectronics revolution. Why? Because we're not clear whether government will invest. We're not sure whether such large investment will go anywhere. Or whether industry will invest. Again, not sure whether government policies will be in tune with that investment. And so the fab never took shape in our country. Now, I hope something will happen. But it is because of this triple helix framework, the government wanting to develop policies, also make some investment, the industry knowing the future, taking initiative and creating investments, and academia bringing in the new knowledge. Together when they work, only then these big platforms get developed, and so on and so forth. Now you want to achieve that, again on the ethics plane or the human values plane. So far, or till recently, I would say, earlier I talked about this trader's mindset, the lowest level of knowledge activity, which enables you to do trading activity. When you do trading activity, your eyesight is on the profit. Your eyesight is on the difference in the what I give, what I take, and what marginal benefit I create. Now, this is inevitable. Any activity, this is absolutely inevitable. So, transactional mindset you cannot eliminate. It is necessary. But if everything is only about transactional mindset and knowledge, India has been a great knowledge country. We have a great knowledge tradition. But if that knowledge sits on a pedestal and doesn't interact with the society or economy enough, then the transactional mindset prevails. That mindset, I'm afraid, will not be that virtuous as compared to a mindset where knowledge comes down from the pedestal, becomes a part of the society, knowledge economy as I was mentioning. It becomes a part of economy, part of society. You give a lot of importance to knowledge-based new values that get created. And under such a situation, what really arises is entrepreneurship. And a trader's mindset and an entrepreneur's mindset, there is one significant difference, and that is while you're in an entrepreneur's mindset, there is always a joy of creation. Just like a good artist has a huge joy of creation. An entrepreneur always creates new products, new innovation, new things, and there is a joy of creation. And in such a mindset, I think this trader's mindset will come down relatively. And I think the society will automatically become more virtuous society. You don't create virtuous society by giving discourses, because I can attend a discourse in the evening after committing sins of the day, feel that now I have washed my sins and be ready for sins next day. You don't create a virtuous society. Whereas when you practice yourself, you do in fact lead to a virtuous society. And that is where human development will take place. And that is where the human values will take precedence over the animal values. And that is where you will get a better society. So I come to my last slide, which is more a cartoon, just to convey what I said so far. It's interesting. We talk about diversity. Diversity also has become one of the buzzwords. We talk about diversity in nature, very important. We must talk about it, respect, enrich diversity. But we don't respect diversity in knowledge activities. So this cartoon, this is a teacher who has a class, and you can see the students in that class. Now teacher says, I have to give you same exam. And that exam is climb the tree. How good is that exam, and how good is that class, and how good is the value of students coming out of that class? Ponder over. Thank you very much.